So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next Catributors podcast. Unfortunately, our guest had to cancel this week, last minute, so it's just Jedi and myself, but we have a lot to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got 2 weeks of dev blogs, a few other little bits of news as well, so plenty to cover.
And I guess we can start with the camera improvements, which are in a closed test right now. So basically, I just want to change a little bit how the camera works. And the most important part for me personally is that they want to allow you to switch between like the spotting aircraft view and the normal view when the aircraft is active. So you don't have to use like the more drop-down view while using the spotting aircraft, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's going to be a welcome change for a lot of people. I wonder how much of this is driven by people, like user feedback over the years, and how much is looking at, I mean, like what are tanks, for instance, the artillery view. That's been around for a while now, where you can press a key and have a shifted view. And I think even Armored Warfare did that, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, this notion of having different camera modes is not really a new idea for this type of game. It's nice it's coming to Warships now, because I know a lot of people do struggle with using the spotter plane view.
Yeah, basically, I never take the spotter plane because like there are certain situations where it's useful, but I've been in a situation where like you use it and then a ship closer gets spotted, and the angle screws you over while aiming at close range. And that you can just on demand switch it is, I would have been happy if you could just cancel the spotter plane. If you can switch the side, it's obviously even better than this, but if you could just deactivate the spotter plane when you want, it would have also just been
true. You can turn off a defensive early. Can you do it with a Hydro? I never tried with a Hydro.
I don't think so. I mean, I guess there's no point.
You would be able to. You can only turn off the defensive by turning off your like secondaries and AA guns. So I suppose that's a unique case.
I mean, there's usually not much reason to turn it. Well, I guess if you could turn it off earlier, you could go through a cooldown sooner if you needed to.
Yeah, that's the only real reason why you would. But I mean, it's the same with the spotter plane, though. Sometimes you would like to get that extra 20 or 30 seconds ahead. But you don't really have the choice, because the spotter plane cooldown is quite long for the vast majority of ships. There's very few ships that have any kind of quicker cooldown. Like Laser's the only one that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's something that I just tried with one ship, right? The more on-demand spotter plane with a short duration and a short cooldown, where you can use it more exactly when you need.
I think the only other one that comes to mind that's got, I mean, doesn't Yamato have something different about its spotter? But is it Weimar or München? One of the tier 7 premium German ones, anyway, which gets like a 20% instead of 10%, but it runs for a much shorter. It only runs for like 60 seconds, but it still has the full cooldown, unfortunately, which I was always a bit annoyed about. It's whichever one has a base range of 14 kilometers, which is kind of
that I think is the Weimar. The Weimar has very few.
Yeah, sounds right. Anyway, it's one of those things that, I mean, we've kind of slightly wandered away from the news poster, but
well, I mean,
yeah, it's weird they haven't experimented more with different kinds of spotting, considering how much they've experimented with other different kinds of consumables and whatnot.
I mean, it could be that they're just finally listening to. I'm not sure what made them do this, but it's a nice change, right? Maybe after years they finally listen to feedback.
Let's not get too excited by that prospect.
Yes. Then we have some changes to test ships.
Yeah, we have a couple of different over the course of these. So yeah, there's been some iterative changes. It's mostly Atlantico, Hornet, and the Italian destroyers.
Yes. I mean, I'm still not sure what to think of the Italian destroyers. I guess we will see. Well, what's interesting is if they like further reduce main battery base range, right? For example, for the Tier 5 from 6.8 to 6.2 kilometer base range on your guns at the Tier 5. That's
yeah, it is. I mean, this particular one from when is this? 1st of the 3rd, so start of the month. Basically nerfs to both main battery and torpedo range, but also slight buffs to gun reload.
I mean, they just really want to make them a full YOLO line, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just absolute nothing but knife fighting, pretty much. We also have some slight nerfs here to the Atlantico.
Yeah, I think they've kept nerfing the Atlantico for a while now.
Another blog, a more recent one, puts that up to 30-second reload. So it's still standard battleship reload. If it starts to go over 30 seconds, then it's going to be a bit iffy. There's also some stuff about the Hornet, but who cares? It's an aircraft carrier.
Exactly. Well, in the next one, we have, one of our favorite topics here, obviously, submarines, because that's a longer one, where I have generally quite a few changes to submarines, also some to the Hornet, I guess.
Yeah, a bunch of changes to super ships here in this one. So let's start with subs, though.
Oh, yes.
Because they're coming next patch once again. We've all had a nice little holiday from submarines, and then we'll have to endure them once more. Yay.
Yes. So it looks like Wargaming has decided to give the submarines sort of a flavor by going homing torpedoes for the Germans and going with the other torpedoes for the Americans. Which the biggest problem is, and that's something that Wargaming just doesn't want to realize, is that homing torpedoes are just a bad concept in general. A concept that I'm not sure if there is a way to make homing torpedoes right. You have a very narrow margin, but I'm not even sure if that exists, because if homing is too good, then they are overpowered. There is no counterplay, and they are like a bad addition. And if it's too bad, then they are useless, and that's also a bad addition, right?
I mean, yeah, sometimes there are things that you really just can't balance. Like, there's stuff you could add, but there'd be no way to effectively balance it to make it both fun to play and fun to play against. I mean, there's a reason we don't have the Kitakami in game still, despite it having been briefly returned for testing, and then still didn't really work. So I think homing torps do kind of fall into that category.
Yeah, the problem is, something homing works very well in PvE, right? There's absolutely no issue with that. But in a PvP scenario, because there is no skill in a sense to having torpedoes home. So the only skill is on the receiving end, can you dodge or not? And if you make the dodge too hard, then it's basically undodgeable, and if you make it too easy, then the torps are useless, right? So finding the margin where really with enough skill you can dodge them, but still get enough hits. It's a very small margin. And the other problem is that torpedoes hit like a truck in a sense, right? And it's like an all or nothing, because usually when you have torpedoes, you spread them out. So don't get that many hits, even if you like predict where the enemy ship is, unless it's like completely broadside. You don't often get the death strikes, but only one torp hit. But if they're homing, it's like probably all or nothing hits, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a bit. I mean, at least they didn't go full on wire guided player directly controls the torpedo. And, yeah. They're probably saving that for the tier 11 super subs.
I mean, yeah, we'll
I shouldn't even say that. Those are cursed words, super subs, but they will. If submarines do come into the game on a permanent basis, you just know we're going to get super subs.
Definitely. So they also interestingly reduced the arming distance of homing torpedoes. I'm not sure what the point of that is. It basically means you could use them point blank, but that's what you have like the high damage torps for, right? So why would you do this to homing torpedoes? I mean, I not see the reason for it, but I don't see there's a big problem in.
It's a little odd.
They say it will make interactions between submarines easier. So okay, I guess in a sub versus sub battle, it might. I mean, yeah. The problem, of course, is with how spotting works. You're down there, you aren't going to see the sub at a long range. So
even so, you practically would have to be almost within ramming distance for it to make any effective difference.
Well, I mean, with subs, that might actually be the case.
I suppose.
I mean, the sub versus sub interaction is pretty terrible anyway. So I also find like the last sentence there, like or the third point, pretty amusing. They say the lifetime of submarines appeared excessively high. So basically, wargaming nerfed anti-submarine warfare and basically buffed submarine survivability. Then when people complained, wargaming said, you all just don't understand it. We actually nerfed submarines. We didn't buff them, even though they buffed submarines. They said, no, we nerfed them. Then they tested it, and it turns out they actually buffed them, as we all know. And now they're like, oh, how could this have happened? It's like they wrote an entire propaganda article about how everyone was wrong and they were right, and now they're like, oh, turns out that if you buff submarines, they're buffed.
Strangely disconnected from what the actual changes are that they're making sometimes, yeah.
Yes, sometimes it feels like they almost believe their own propaganda. But what I also find interesting, right, we now have more details about those submarine changes. And they said German submarines have effective homing torpedoes and Americans have powerful conventional torpedoes. But there isn't actually any specific change for submarine, for the German home. Like, I mean, there are changes for homing torpedoes, but they seem to be pretty much the same for the US and for the Germans. So they did actually buff the conventional torpedoes for the US, but didn't really buff the homing torpedoes for the Germans, even though the Germans are supposed to have the better homing ones. So I feel like there is something missing there.
Well, yes, like what you were saying, trying to balance just the idea of homing torpedoes. Yeah. So I'm not looking forward to it especially, but it's sort of inevitable it's going to happen, I suppose. Well, we'll see. I'm honestly not seeing what with the kind of changes they have talked about. I mean, I suppose we'll have to see it in action to really get the full idea, but I'm not seeing anything super substantial in terms of it changing how subs were interacting with surface ships and other subs.
I mean, we've had, I think, at least 3 or 4 dev blocks already with changes since the last test. And the last changes even didn't never make it into the live. They were, I think, applied, but they were never live tested. Like, submarines, I think, now have a lot more hit points, and there is only ever one charge of, like, plane. And they changed, like, the plane area, and that submarines now always get the flooding or so if they get hit. Now they've further nerfed, like, the damage con of the subs, and they increase the damage of the depth charges. So there have been like so many changes by now since the last test that it's going to be interesting how they turn out. Not that any of them, not they've addressed the core issue at any point, but
I mean, the biggest of the changes that I can remember anyway seem to be swapping around what Hydro and the other consumable, like making one non-limited and making the other one limited, and changing how Hydro works a little bit. And
the oil spills, and that you can now see where the pings are coming from.
Yeah.
Not that you need pings anymore for the conventional torpedoes.
So there's also some other changes to super ships.
Yeah, mostly I think the super ships, they got their, instead of like one beefy plane, they have two planes that are a little bit more vulnerable, so it might actually be possible to defend against them. No, it won't be. It looks more likely, that in theory it might be possible to defend against.
But in practice, no.
I mean, in practice, they're just too fast.
They did buff the detectability of Yamagiri, which is, I guess it wasn't being that particularly effective.
Yeah, also it now has like the gun fire buff, right?
Oh yeah, the old stop firing mode. Rishsorki's getting... Annapolis getting a buff.
I mean, I doubt that this fire buff does anything too substantial, because it's the same like with the cruisers, right? It's not something that you want to use most of the time. It's just, well, if you only get one salvo off, because then the enemy is going to disappear. That's the only time when you're going to use this. Or if you're really certain that it's going to finish off an enemy. But generally, it's a very, very situational. And I also like that they think it looks too much like Shimakaze, so they buffed the detectability to make it more like Shimakaze.
I mean, I'm kind of confused with what they want with that, because we've already got Harugamo, Shima, and then sitting in between the two of them, you've got Hayate. So what else are you really going to do at that stage? I don't know.
I mean, it's just a bigger Shima, right, with a few more torps.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like the that you can switch the torpedoes is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a nice mechanic, and I wish we had it on just the regular Tech Tree ships, to be honest.
Yes. It's also interesting. It's one of the few super mechanics that's actually great and good, right? That's why they are not impressed by it. They like more useless stuff, so they gave it a useless mechanic too. Well, then they've some changes to the other ones, I think, that are not so interesting.
Yeah, slight nerf to Satsuma, slight buff to Panova. Yeah. Nothing super earth-shattering.
I mean,
Can we?
It's hard to say whether I want to go with the super ships anyway. I mean, for the most part, they're just like slightly bigger Tech Tree ships, right? With small gimmicks that mostly don't do much.
Yeah, it's kind of odd in one way. I mean, it's very obvious. Obviously, just here's some extra endgame content, kind of thing. But it almost makes me think, well, why don't they just actually do tier 11 instead of this weird sort of slightly half-assed way of doing it? I don't know.
It might just be because they said they'd never do tier 11 or so. I don't know. I mean, they are obviously doing tier 11. They just call them super ships. Maybe they feel like it's better marketing. Maybe. I feel like people are more excited about having a super ship instead of just having a tier 11. Or maybe they think they can like justify having a different economy, or I don't know, different decision method. Well,
then we come on to a fun topic of first, a ship that I guess was going to be inevitable we'd see at some point, the Aquila, which, for those who are unaware, Italy, like Germany, was actually in the process of building an aircraft carrier. In this case, it was I think a cruiser, not cruiser, cruise liner conversion, but it never got finished basically, and the remains were scrapped post-war, so it didn't really go anywhere. But it at least partially existed. And so, it's going to be in the game, and it's going to be Tier 8, and it's going to have 2 squadrons, and the planes are, of course, going to be completely weird and ahistoric, but that just, that's never stopped wargaming before. That's just the norm for them.
True.
So it's going to have attack aircraft and torpedo bombers, at least in these initial stats, and they're going to be pretty fast. That seems to be their gimmick, is they're going to be weak but fast. So I guess we'll see how many, what it has in terms of plane reserves.
Would I like?
It's going to be.
I'm looking at this.
It could end up being like a cross between Kaga and the Germans.
No, we don't need more Kaga, please.
We'll see.
But does it state what kind of rockets? Because I'm looking at the rockets and I can't see what damage type, right? There's 12 rockets in payload, maximum rocket damage, but are those like AP, AG, or SAM?
I'm guessing high explosive, but yeah, you're right, it doesn't say.
Because, I mean, it would, I wouldn't have been surprised if they get SAP rockets.
Yeah, each squadron has larger number of planes divided into 2 attacking flights. Oh, here we go. It does say accurate armor-piercing rockets. Okay. So, AP rockets and torpedo bombers. I'm sure people are going to be much more using one than the other. We'll see exactly how effective the AP rockets are. Hell, at least it means you don't have to worry about them quite so much with destroyers, although rocket planes are less of a worry for destroyers generally these days. Let's see. Don't think we have any. We do have some torpedo stats. 30 knots. Range 3.5 kilometers, arming distance 400 meters. I'm not sure offhand how that compares. Let's take a look at, where is it? Auguste von Parseval. It doesn't actually have the torpedo. Oh, I guess it doesn't have it on Warships fitting tool. Well, people will be able to look it up for themselves and see how that compares. And also bear in mind these are initial stats. So there doesn't seem to be anything completely egregious there, which is certainly not what we can say about the other ship they have announced, which is the USS San Diego. This one's caused a little bit of a ruckus on the NA side, particularly because it's basically an extremely flawed starting concept. Like, the fact that this is the starting concept at all is kind of worrying. And as some people have noted, it seems like they're going for a down-tiered Austin rather than an up-tiered Atlanta, because it is an Atlanta class. It was the most decorated ship in the US Navy. And it does have the wing turrets of the Atlanta, but it's basically, it looks like they want to balance it around the burst fire that the Austin can manage with SAP shells. But of course, not going to have the shell characteristics of the Austin, you're going to have the shell characteristics of the Atlanta. And it's actually worse than the Atlanta in a lot of ways, except it's at tier 8. So, there's some extreme skepticism. I mean, Little White Mouse started a forum on a thread on the NA forum, which I skimmed through a bit, and there were some official responses which were not exactly confidence-inspiring, and basically amounted to, well, this is just the initial, stuff, and it can change, and Little White Mouse then counterpointed that, yes, but we have so many examples of flawed concepts where they stuck with the initial flawed concept right through to it going live. And we can even point at whole lines like that. I mean, like the Italian battleship line, for example, which is not exactly a popular one for the most part. And just the dispersion on those is so horrible. And some of them in particular, I mean, the Vittorio Veneto has got to be one of the worst Tier 8 battleships.
That's the biggest issue with wargaming, right? Because they say always, we can change, but they never actually change it unless there is enough drama or feedback about it, right?
Yes. So in a way, it's not surprising that people are wanting to get vocal about this now and say, well, actually, this looks like a really bad concept, and you should change the core concept rather than saying we'll just buff it a bit until it works properly. Because, I mean, okay, it's going to have a 16-kilometer firing range, and that's not great for Tier 8, but there are others that have that. But with Atlanta ballistics, good luck hitting anything that's not completely stationary. It's also going to have a base reload time of 8.5 seconds for 5-inch guns.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And it has worse... it's using the... is it like the cruiser dispersion model rather than destroyer dispersion or something like that? So it's not even going to have that the Atlanta and the Flint has. So basically, it's going to have terrible DPM. It won't be able to hit anything at ranges, up to its max range anyway. You've got the exact same hit points as Atlanta, but you can see tier 10s. It's got a tiny bit better rudder shift, but you're not exactly going to be duking it out in the open with this thing. And they've touted its AA as being a thing, and this was one of its famous things that the real life San Diego was famous for, was its AA escort duties. It shot down a lot of planes, it protected a lot of Allied ships, but that does not translate to it being particularly useful in game at all. So it's weird. They've basically ignored the actual historical ship's achievements, and they've tried to fit in this concept of it's going to be a down-tiered Austin, except it's not really. It's an up-tiered Atlanta that's worse.
Yeah. Like bringing it up a tier and basically nerfing the firepower is a weird choice.
It is.
But they have like unlimited main battery reload booster, but it's...
That's a crutch. They've deliberately made the DPM bad and then given it this crutch that it has to rely on. And that is not a good core concept for a ship. It really isn't, especially with these ballistics. So either the core concept changes or it's going to come out as a ship that nobody's going to play, and Wargaming's going to scratch their head and go, but why does nobody like it? So let's hope they actually do listen to the feedback that they are getting right now, that this is not a good core concept, that they need to go back to the drawing board and actually come up with a good idea of what this is going to be. I mean, making it a strong AA ship at tier 8 with a long AA range would actually be a novelty.
That would be making a strong AA ship would be a novelty in itself.
Yeah. That would actually make it somewhat different from basically any other tier 8 cruiser. I mean, there's maybe Cheshire, but I don't really see what they're trying to go for with this.
I mean, tops are, I think, the same as Atlanta as well.
Yeah, 4.5 kilometers. There might be slightly more damage. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But it's like, if you're trying to close the distance with someone, I mean, bear in mind this is Atlanta's got a low health pool for tier 7. When you've got 27k health at tier 8, and we all know what Atlanta's armor is like, so like good luck.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they're sticking with about that, like 16 millimeter. Like it's and as you said with those gun characters, right? If you have a main battery reload booster, that can be very nice if like a ship shows broadside and you can burst it down or something. But with Atlanta ballistics, you aren't really doing that. I mean, you can use it if a destroyer or so is spotted. But the sad part is that an actual Atlanta has better reload with the same gun. So an
You
actual
would be better off than the
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the point, I'm pretty sure LWM or somebody else in that thread did the maths and was like, well, actually, even with it firing under the full reload booster, it still doesn't quite have the same DPM as at the Atlanta. So it's paying an incredibly heavy price for having SAP shells that, you're only going to get to use in that burst capacity. Like, who knows how long the cooldown's going to be. So, it's just a bad idea. And it's made a lot of the ANA folks mad, because it's not like Wargaming haven't run into this exact same thing before with the Alabama. It's like, okay, we're going to take this famous ship and then you can't have it, or we're going to take this famous ship and it's going to be a rubbish parody of its real self. I don't know.
Yeah, like the mind-boggling thing is, like, I would say, okay, like, you have a concept, you have an idea, the base stats don't matter that much because you test, but the base stats needs to make, like, there are some stats that on paper don't make sense already, right? If you take a tier 7 ship, you make it tier 8 and you reduce the gun power, there is something seriously wrong, right? And it doesn't really, it gets 3 kilometers more range for it. With shells that aren't doing much at this range.
The stealth ends up being worse as well, right? They made the base stealth worse in order to, I guess,
compensate for the module.
Compensate for the fact you get a tier 8 module, which is okay. As if you don't already have enough going on, you've got to make the stealth worse as well. I mean, it's still okay stealth for a tier 8 cruiser, but you're not... Like with the Atlanta, somebody spots you and you know that you're very, very close to them being in radar range. This thing doesn't have radar.
True, it doesn't even have radar. Oh, no. There is also another mockery, right? Because they Hydro and defensive area are in 2 separate slots. Yes, because nobody picks defensive on an Atlanta because it's freaking useless. Instead of making that consumable useful again in some way.
That's no selling point. They haven't even tried to patch the holes by sticking on a speed booster, which they do sometimes. So, yeah. This surely... So, it's just a bad idea. This surely must change, because if it doesn't, it's going to come out as probably one of the worst tier 8 premiums. Well, and that's even stacking it up next to Tiger 59. So yeah, it's a bit weird. It's one of those times when you really have to wonder what exactly they were thinking, and to have this as their starting point. So in a way, it's good that we get to see this information, and okay, hooray for communication and all that. But Wargaming then has to be on the other side of that and actually be paying attention to what people's feedback is and what people think of the concept. Because if it's really overwhelmingly negative, then you should probably be taking something away from that and thinking maybe we've made something that isn't going to work. Especially if it's someone like Little White Mouse.
Yeah.
Is one of the more sort of technically design proficient community folks that, they themselves managed to drive away once upon a time, not that long ago. But it's weird.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just stare at it and your brain tries to think for a reason, because there's there's even a benefit for Wargaming, right? If they have a super famous ship that people would be willing to spend a lot of money on because it has that history, right? You want to make it somewhat attractive as well. But they take something like this and then they come up with base stats that make no sense even on paper, right? And why?
Yeah. I mean, I've had this head scratcher in the past with, I can't even remember specific examples, but when we were both still CCs and, testing ships or whatever, occasionally you'd get something and it would be a real head scratcher. You'd think, why why have they done this? What is this supposed to be? What role is it supposed to fill? How is it supposed to be fun or enjoyable or effective? And some of those ships ended up then actually coming out on the live server, and they tend to be the ones who don't play very much. I mean, I think Poltava was probably one of those.
This reminds me of the set, what was it, set 39, the tier 7 premium German, the Hydro. That was originally planned as a tier 8, and it was tested as a tier 8, and it was in every stat it had, it was worse than the tech tree tier 8. And people were like, why are you making a premium that is literally just worse in every single stat than the tech tree? And Walking was like, oh, no, we just need to test this. And they're like, no, you don't need to test this. It's worse in every stat. Then they were like, oh, all right, we just keep the stats and make it a tier 7. And it wasn't even overpowered at tier 7. So
this is far from the first time we've seen these kind of weird design decisions from Wargaming. So I can understand why Little White Mouse and other members of the community are especially wary of just sitting back and thinking, oh, it's okay, they'll change it and, they'll come up with something that works. They won't necessarily, so it's a good idea to kind of try and nip this stuff in the bud. But yeah.
Well, we shall see how this continues. If there is enough of a shitstorm, maybe Wargaming will react. It's the only thing that makes them react.
It's definitely one there will be a lot of scrutiny on. Even just from the NA side, because it's basically the American HMS Warspite in terms of, the most battle honors. We'll see. As ever, fingers crossed they actually pay attention to, what the community is telling them, which isn't always a guarantee.
I mean, the biggest bet that we have is that the sales will tank if they make the ship bad. So they might just be more inclined to buff it. Oh, probably. Well, I mean, we can move on to the next head scratcher, which is... when I saw the title changes to aircraft detection mechanics close test, they've and I mentioned it here, they have had this radio concept for many months ago where they wanted to test something, and we were like, could be an improvement for spotting. We will see what they do with it. And now they have sort of dropped this again and have another idea.
An even better one.
I have to say, they have an idea that's so stupid that they almost make submarines look like a good idea, right? Like, this is one of the most stupidest things I have read in my entire life, I think. So I'm sorry if you feel your brain cells committing suicide while we go through this article. I apologize.
I can't quite agree on the stupidest thing, because I have read some statements by Donald Trump, for example, but it's still pretty within the context of World of Warships. It's like, you have to wonder if the same guy that came up with this came up with the San Diego concept kind of thing. Like, it's pretty bad. Anyway, I'll let you read it out, because I know you've been bottling this up.
Okay, so in this new concept, airplane squadrons being directly controlled by a player have a limited cone of view within which enemy ships can be spotted, and info about the position is shared with the entire team. So unfortunately they don't say what the cone will be. I imagine it won't be a very small cone. I would assume it's somewhere between 90 and 180 degrees, but we don't know, right? They say a cone, so keep that in mind. But basically the ships that you look at will be spotted, and the ships that are like sort of behind you will not be spotted. The enemy ships outside this field of view will not be visible unless the IA is firing at the squadron. What this also means is that, for example, if you aren't spotted because you are like to the side, you're outside of the vision cone, but still close to the ship that's getting attacked, you're incentivized to turn your anti-air off, right? So basically they make changes to, like, let's say you are like a rooster and the destroyer next to you is attacked, you're getting punished if you try to help that destroyer with your anti-air. So they are actively trying to punish you for using your anti-air unless it's self-protection. Next, this field of view can be expanded to cover the full 360 degrees around the squadron with a special consumable. So, okay. That cone isn't even always limited. You get the consumable to like get around this and just become a super spotter. And now the thing that makes this whole thing like the real idiocy that is that they do away with air spotting range, right? Basically, the ship's base detectability range by air is now equal to the detectability range by sea. But planes can maximum spot to at 10 kilometers. That means, yes, like if you are in your gearing, you'll be spotted at 5.8 kilometers by planes. If you're in a Des Moines, you're going to be spotted at 10 kilometers by planes. If you're in your core first, you're also going to be spotted by 10 kilometers by planes. So, yes, you can spot like a cruiser now, like a Des Moines, from 10 kilometers with your planes if you're going towards it, right? Unless it's outside of your cone, in which case you can always press the consumable. So, a destroyer is basically, if you just point your planes towards the camp and you fly towards the camp, you're going to spot like the entire camp. And you can just fly through it and press this consumable just in case it's you kind of like turned the wrong way and it's outside of your cone. Now we don't know how long this consumable lasts and how many charges it has, but so basically they are making air spotting a lot more powerful. And I mean a lot more powerful because air spotting ranges are vastly better than air spotting. So they make air spotting a lot more powerful while incentivizing ships to not help others with anti-air because they're punishing you if you're trying to use your anti-air.
Just last time that we did a podcast 2 weeks ago now, but yeah, we were talking about how cruisers, it seems like there's less cruisers around these days in high tier matches. I don't think this will help somehow. I think this might depress the cruiser population even further, let alone what it's going to do to destroyer players who are already, not having the most fun in the world, shall we say, when it comes to carrier spotting. This is... I don't understand where they're coming from this at all. This is inexplicable.
Yeah,
they would even begin to have this idea, let alone publish that they've had this idea and want to test this idea.
I mean, the only ship that might benefit from this, or the only ship class, are battleships, because battleships might have a very high detectability right now. Anyway, it might be over 10 even, so they might actually get this slight buff. But cruisers and destroyers are heavily nerfed. The ships that actually have a problem with air spotting. And then they throw the incentive to turn off anti-air. That's... it makes your brain hurt.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's really hard to comprehend. Like, this is not some kind of April 1st thing. Like, this is just...
Yeah.
Baffling. It really is.
Like, they had about 2 years or 1.5 years, they had in the past an idea to address plane spotting by nerfing anti-air. And that was laughed at by the community, but even that idea wasn't as bad as this. I mean, it made plane spotting better and nerfed anti-air. They already had an idea like this in the past, but it wasn't as extreme as this. This is like cranked up buffing carriers to 11. And what I can't get over it is, right, the simplest thing would just be to not have carrier spotting other than on the minimap, but they've shot that idea down. Then they came up with an idea to buff carriers that was shot down by the community. Then they came up with the radio concept, which was sort of like minimap only spotting, but in a more limited way, which could have been a good concept. And now they come up with an even dumber buff to carriers. With that, they are changing between they introduce an idea that would be good, and then they say we internally tested it doesn't work. Then they try an idea to buff carriers, and the community shoots them down. Then they're like, yeah, okay, maybe we don't buff carriers. Then they come up with an idea that could be good, internally tested, and then they drop that again and go, hey, why don't we buff carriers now?
Yeah.
And it's a problem with a very easy solution, and they just refuse to take it, and they come up with more and more convoluted ways to make carriers stronger.
I can't but help think of that meme where you see the woman holding the child up, and then you've got the bottom panel, and it's like, and there's another kid struggling in the foreground, and then the bottom panel where it's like a skeleton that's sitting at the bottom of the water. And the kid that they're, holding up is the carriers, and then everyone else is kind of struggling and drowning behind them. It's weird. I mean, there are ways that you could change carrier spotting to actually be fair, and the fact that they've acknowledged that the current system isn't exactly that fair. It's good that they're looking for alternative solutions, but this would be a step backwards. A big step backwards. So I'm not exactly clear how. I can't get my head around how this is going to help in their eyes. What their concept is of making things better, if this is one of their ideas of how they can make things better. Because it seems like they have a very different idea of what that means compared to everybody else.
No, it's a bit like wargame. I said it in the past. It almost looks like the carriers have their own lobbying group, right, within wargaming, and it looks like wargaming on the surface. They say we acknowledge that carrier spotting is a problem, but anytime they try to do something, they try to sneak in a buff for carriers, right? It's like they're like, yeah, it's a problem. We're going to address that problem. How about we address that problem by buffing carrier? Oh, no, you don't want it. Let's wait for a couple of months and we try to buff carriers a different way under the umbrella of nerfing spotting. I get rather emotional about this because I feel like carrier spotting is such a bad influence on the game and such an unfun mechanic. And it could be so easily addressed, and I don't even think most carrier players would mind if it got addressed because they don't care about spotting anyway. And it's the one thing where wargaming just isn't budging for whatever reason.
The fact that they won't even just give us a public test with, just playing the same kind of delay that we have with radar. The solution's right there. We already have this as a thing in game.
Yeah, the game has already plenty of solutions for the problem in it. They just don't want to do that.
Yeah. So, San Diego's pretty bad, but this has definitely been the big WTF moment of this week's news in Warships. Yeah, it is. It's odd. I can only hope that whatever testing they do, absolutely, because it's going to be on the closed test, so hopefully the testing shows what a bad idea this is and they abandon it. But it's just even alarming the fact that they want to test this idea to begin with, under the somehow notion that it's going to be better for anybody except carriers.
Yeah, I've saw like that the Reddit thread got already voted into oblivion, and the community was not very happy about this. But I have no words. Sorta.
Well, no more words. We've already had some words. Quite a few words.
True, I suppose.
Yeah, sometimes you really get the impression that they're just kind of throwing darts at dartboards, and they don't quite know what they're actually doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend that trying to make a game like World Warships is a particularly easy task, but even so, that's just such an obvious blunder that you just have to wonder why they're doing things like that sometimes.
Yeah, we are not claiming that balancing in itself is easy, but for example, spotting that 5 is bigger than 4 is pretty easy, and that's the level that they are failing. That's the level where wargaming is failing, right? That's it's such basics that they don't seem to comprehend about their own game.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on to the next?
Oh, yes,
thing?
yes.
I mean,
More
we could just
sub
sit and rant
changes.
about this round in circles more and more, I suppose.
More Hornet sub changes, Atlantico changes, and Italian destroyer changes. So we don't know much about the how the Hornet performs so fine. Maya has been nerfed. Maya looked like extremely overpowered at tier 7, so I think that makes sense. They basically had the idea of like making an Atago at tier 7 ship. And turns out that might be a bit too strong, so there might be some nerfs there.
Yeah, that one's like sometimes you see these repeated nerfs, and it's like, okay, yeah, that seems okay. You know, if it was doing that strongly, then sure. But sometimes it's the opposite, like the Dido, which you kept seeing nerf after nerf in the dev blogs, and yeah, the actual Dido is not that strong. I mean, it's not bad, but when your 133 mil guns, your 5.25 inch guns fire at have the same rate of fire as 152 mil guns, then yeah, you have a lot of downsides without the benefits of the bigger guns, kind of thing. So we'll see what Maya's like, but on the face of it, it seems like it might be justified.
You remember when people always saw those nerfs on devlog and people were like, why you keep nerfing Dido and Wargaming? It's like, look, we know what we are doing, right? Because it's just how strong this ship is. It needs those nerfs. And then it came out and people were like, wait a moment. No, it didn't.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Atlantico keeps getting nerfed. Bit more about the Atlantico later. I think it's going to be like obviously the next Dockyard ship. The Dockyard has also been announced now. We'll see as a Dockyard ship. We've said this in the past. I don't have high hopes for it, but I mean, I like secondary ships, so I kind of.
Yeah, unless it's completely horrible, it should be at least somewhat interesting. And it's still at least a 30-second reload is still fairly standard. They've not gone right. Have a 40-second reload. Enjoy, which we've had with some ships in the past. Yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping it's fun. I mean, the Marlborough was okay, and the Repulse was actually pretty good. So hopefully, it's on that side of things. I actually run into one or two in battle as well, but despite the temptation to ask the player, "Oh, how is it?" There's no point asking. I know how they're going to respond. They can't actually tell me what it's like because they're not allowed to. But yeah, tempting nonetheless.
Then they've changed the smoke on the Italians. The thing is, they haven't stated how the previous parameters were, and I don't know. I'd have to look up some old devblog, I guess, so I can't actually tell what's changed there. But it seems like it's...
Again, some of these fairly... like the lower tier ones, I guess, were overperforming a bit with their torpedoes, given that everything at lower tier happens at fairly close ranges. Although there are still some other lower tier DDs that do have still a pretty quick reload. I think the Derbsky has like 20 seconds, for crying out loud. So yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell how these are going to be because they're such a strongly skewed line in terms of everything about them is about being short ranged.
Yeah, but they don't really have the concealment to back it up, and it's like you have your smoke only lasts 25 seconds, and you only have 3 charges, well, 4 with Superintendent. So you got 4 charges of smoke, but they are very, very short.
It's kind of odd to see what they're going to be like. I mean, I think most people would have been okay with just a kind of reasonably standard line of destroyers, and I guess they're at the point where, in terms of doing new concepts for lines of ships or new flavors for lines of ships, that they're having to try the wacky stuff to make it different from anything that's in the game already.
I mean, wacky can be fun. I'm just a bit like, they have this ultra short gun range, so I wonder how well they'll do against stuff like Raider. Or an enemy destroyer that can like Hydra. There are some. The thing is, especially at higher tiers, there are some incredibly powerful anti-destroyer destroyers. Right, for the newest one is the Sherman. The Sherman just eats through an destroyer like crazy, right? And it has reasonably, considering with 6.5, nothing good, but with the smoke and the Hydra, that's a very powerful thing. And what's an Italian going to do, right, against something like this?
They do seem like they're going to be pretty easy to counter.
Yeah, it's like they have to
a really high skill ceiling.
Yeah, it looks like. I mean, I haven't played them obviously, but from the design, it looks like they're supposed to be gun YOLO boats, right? Because they're probably going to hurt like a truck with the guns, but they have so little range that they have to, like I said, basically push in pretty hard. Even with ranged mods and so on, the range isn't going to be good. So.
I'm not intrinsically opposed to this idea of a really niche line, I have to say. I mean, we have enough other lines of destroyers in the game at this point that, like, not every line has to be super popular. But I still have to wonder exactly how playable or enjoyable these are going to be outside of some tiny hardcore of players that really enjoy the high danger that they represent, the high adrenaline play style.
The thing is, what you like don't want is basically if the destroyer line just is encouraged to, at the start of a game, charge into a camp and then trade with the enemy destroyer because it can basically ambush them and gun them down so quickly. But obviously, since you spotted yourself, you're also gonna die, right? If you have a line that's basically designed to just charge in and have a early trade with the enemy destroyer, that would be bad. So we're gonna see how they turn out. But
yeah, there's always that thing of how wargaming envisages people will play the ship versus how people actually play the ship. So yes. Yeah, who knows what it'll be like when actual players get their hands on them. But I bet you it won't quite be what wargaming had in mind.
Well, then we have more sub changes. So the last in a long list of sub changes since we've last seen them, I suppose. Basically, they've now reduced dive capacity and so on. They want us force submarines a bit more to the surface. It's like there have been some changes in recently to make submarines
like a bit more counterable. Didn't they talk in a previous one about the refresh, the recharge rate was going to be a lot quicker, but they were going to cut down the dive capacity? I mean, I'm guessing they're cutting it down even further from what they had initially thought of. And they're increasing the max flooding damage to 1/3 as well, which is fairly significant.
Yeah, it's like they also increased like the time it takes for damage count to recharge. And don't they like have limited number of damage counts now, and depth charges are guaranteed flooding. So for some reason, Wargaming wants to like make flooding the main way to deal with submarines instead of like the direct depth charge damage. I mean, as we've said earlier, submarines still don't make any sense.
Still a square peg trying to fit in a round hole.
Nobody's looking forward to seeing submarines in test again. They have been majorly changed, but in the end, they still make sense. Well, then further, there is now the next super ship that has been announced. Wargaming has been really working hard on super ships. It looks like they roll out one after the other, even though they are all still being tested.
Yeah, so we have the Patry, which is going to have the same guns as the Republic, but more of them. It's going to have 3 quad turrets for a total of 12 guns. The article doesn't really give us any idea of the provenance of this ship, so it might be more or less a total wargaming fabrication. We'll see. Yeah. They've got like 2 paragraphs going into how they chose the name Patry, which is nice if you're interested in that side of kind of naval tradition. It would be nice to know a little bit about what inspired the actual ship in terms of prospective ship designs as well, or if it was just completely made up by them. So,
what I have to say is, I think they've nerfed the high explosive chance, because I think Republic had over 60% and now it's only 48, which is pretty good, but
yeah, it's still quite high. Still nothing to be sniffed at. But yeah, that's offset by. We'll tell you what the special combat instructions are. You will get plus 7% to your ship speed, and that's on top of already having an engine boost. So I presume it's just the same as the regular battleship engine boost, but that's still going to get you up to something fairly nutty, presumably. I mean, the base speed is 31 knots. So that plus your Sierra Mike flag plus engine boost plus the combat instructions. I mean, I don't know. Probably north of, 36 knots, 37 knots altogether?
pretty fast.
I don't know if it's high, but yeah. Your HE shells will gain an extra 90% penetration. So eat your heart out, Conqueror.
By the way, I just checked. No, 48 is also the same. It's the same as the Republic.
Okay,
but,
all right. The main battery will reload 20% faster, and it will take 12 qualified gunshots. I'm guessing just 12 hits, 12 pens. It doesn't really say what the... I'm guessing it'll be 12 hits. So you need a dozen hits, and you'll get 50 seconds of extra speed, super high HE penetration, and a bit faster reload. So, yeah, that's just what we needed. It's more high-tier battleship HE spam. Yay! Yeah, that's not going to be... Especially if you're in a cruiser, that's really not going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, the Republic is already like a long-range ship. It's not the best. Well, armored is also a firing range. They aren't very popular. I think most people haven't realized just how powerful the explosive is in the French.
Yes and no. I took a relatively long time to get to the Republic, and I've played it a bit, but yeah, it's a really reliable ship, and I can play it and be like, oh yeah, this is really good. But it's also just very samey. I don't know. There's just something quite boring's not the right word, but it kind of gets stale very quickly playing the Republic.
It doesn't have quite an identity. If you want to do the long-range high explosive stuff, you're better off in like a Conqueror Thunderer or something. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, a Thunderer basically does the same thing, just better. Republic is mostly just fast, which can be interesting. But, in the end of the day, it's not like you're zipping that much around the map in a battleship anyway, usually.
Yeah. I mean, it does have a longer reload time than the Republic, but more guns, so that makes sense. I honestly, I know we've already got the Hanover, but it would be nice to have a secondary themed French battleship. Some people already do try and spec into secondaries in their French battleships, particularly the Republic. And that's a thing that might actually, like, if they leaned into that and made that a thing, more on a par with what the Germans have, I mean, that could be something that's a bit interesting and a bit different.
The problem is that the 100mm like French aren't penning anything.
It's not nearly as good, and you don't have the extra HE pen that the German battleships get. So it's not an efficient way to build your German battleships at all. But if they made one where it was efficient to build it that way, that the whole gimmick was that, then, like I said, that would be something different. But this just seems like Republic with a bit of a buff in terms of the combat instructions and an encouragement to fire lots of high explosive while those instructions are active.
Yeah, it's like a lot of those super ships, it's just like more of the same, right? Hanover is just a bigger Kurfürst. Satsuma, how it is called, is a bigger Yamato, and Yamagiria is a bigger Shimakaze. It's like they've just taken what's already there and made it a bit bigger.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not doing anything particularly new or interesting. It's just kind of it's the tier 11 French battleship.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just to that, and there's nothing more to say about it really. So unless there are some big changes to this somewhere along the line, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen people getting that excited about super ships anyway. I don't see them in game that often, and I know partly that's just the method of distribution. But even when I've had them, I play them like 1 or 2 games, and it's just I just rather, if we're going to play tier 10s, I'd just rather play my regular tier 10s for the most part, to be honest.
I mean, they can't earn credits, so a lot of people that are not that flush with credits see no reason to play the super ship, I suppose. And then there is the fact that the method of distribution is annoying because obviously, since the ship gets removed from your port, right, you have to re-equip it every time. And even though this is not something that takes that long, it's annoying, right? If every time you unlock like the Yamagiri again, you gotta put on like all of your modules and so again, and it's like you've unlocked it once, you've played it, you've seen how it goes. Why would you go through the annoying thing again just to play it some more? It's not that exciting or different enough. It doesn't earn you credit. So
here's a completely mad thought. What if they'd made it so you could play these things and earn flags? I think a lot more people would have been like, "Yeah, it doesn't get credits, but sure, it earns flags. I'll play it and get some flags out of it at least." But yeah,
I don't want you to have flags.
No, I can't be farming those detonation flags. I mean, come on.
Exactly. Imagine they gave you an actual way to farm detonation flags.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the exciting new French super ship. Everyone's so excited. Yay.
Yes. Well, speaking of other exciting news, the new dockyard is announced, and like Italian Destroyers Part 2 event, that's obviously not the next patch, but the patch afterwards already. So there's going to be a new collection.
And just like previous ones, it will allow you to unlock 2 flags on your Italian ships. And you also get, if you don't have it already, the Tier 6 destroyer Lione, if you actually complete the collection. That's actually not bad. Lione is kind of a fun little Tier 6. I think it's one of the more overlooked Tier 6 destroyers. It's got a really nice number of guns on a Tier 6 destroyer. It doesn't reload particularly quickly, but it's a little bit like the Ochotnik. Like, there's not that many other destroyers around that have that number of guns, period, let alone at Tier 6. So, I kind of enjoy taking it out once in a while. I mean, the torpedoes aren't especially brilliant, but they do reload very quickly. And they actually do have quite a long range. They're almost like the cruiser torpedoes than anything else.
I have to admit,
long range, fairly slow, but yeah.
I have to admit, I didn't even realize that the Lione exists.
I mean, yeah, and it's also got, I think, American-style smoke. So the smoke lasts for a long time as well. It's a pretty interesting and reasonably fun little ship. So that's nice to have as a reward for just a collection. You don't get ships as rewards for collections very often. So yeah, thumbs up for that. That's quite a nice one. Refurbished Taranto, which is kind of not surprising given it's an Italian-themed thing.
And I presume when they say updated, maybe they even gave it the visual treatment.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not just this bunting and flags. It might actually be a full visual overhaul like they've done with some of the other ports.
Then, as we've known before, the next dockyard is going to be the Atlantico.
Which I have to say, I'm particularly pleased they're doing it as they've modelled the shipyard background as a Clydebank shipyard. So, yay, Scotland! It's nice to see the Scottish shipbuilding industry, which was, hugely important during World War II and even before World War II. It's one of the mainstays of not just the Royal Navy ships being built, but merchant ships being built as well. Huge numbers were built on the Clyde. So it's nice to see it represented in game.
Yeah, then we also know the dockyard is going to be 22 stages. And 1,750 doubloons for each stage. I don't know what was the price this time, like for the last one.
I can't remember what the stages were for the Marlborough, but I have a feeling they were more than that. The number of stages was definitely higher, but it was the same as with the couple of previous ones. That you'll have to buy a minimum of 3, and you'll have the option of buying more. We don't know what else is going to be available, though, if they'll make some other mid-tier ship available on the way to getting the Atlantico, or if it will just be the Atlantico. But it seems on the face of it fairly reasonable. I guess we don't know what the actual missions are yet, though.
True.
That's always the question mark. That's how grindy they make it. But you'll have 2 patches.
It's about 2 months.
To do the missions, and the dockyard will remain available for a further patch. So if you've got the doubloons and a couple of missions left that you weren't able to complete, then you'll be able to at least buy the last couple of stages. So yeah, and as with previous ones as well, if you have bought the Atlantico outright, or you buy more missions than you end up. Like if you buy like the 8 mission bundle or whatever it is that they do at the start, and then you complete the entire rest of the mission chain, you'll get 250 steel for each of the excess missions after the final completion one. So it's a way to get some steel as well if you're really hurting for steel. But you will have to spend some actual money in order to get that steel. But for some people, that's probably more palatable than grinding through playing ranked games.
True. Yes, Tom, the dockyard will be up for 2 patches, 11.3 and 11.4. And I think the next patch is 11.2, so it's going to be like in over a month that it's going to start, and then it's going to be active for 2 months. But the missions are usually like, the stages are time gated, right? So at first, for the first week, you can only complete like the first mission chain, right? And then after a week, the second mission chain unlocks, and so you don't have the full time for all the missions. But
yeah, the only way you can skip ahead is by flashing your credit card and buying through the stages, essentially. Which is, kind of what they're hoping you'll do.
True. But it also means that, like, no matter how fast you are with the first mission, right, the last one, which will take the longest, you will have. Well, we will see how much you'll have. You probably have like 2 or 3 weeks or so for the last stage. But as I said, like, we don't know how hard or easy the missions are going to be, because Wargaming had a vast variety in those things.
Yes, there's been quite the variation in the past of like the low point being the Puerto Rico, definitely, and then some in the following ones where they were at least a bit more upfront of you're going to have to buy at least a couple. Some of the missions even then were incredibly grindy.
I mean, it could be that this is less so because it's only a tier 8. So it could be that they're making it a bit easier and less expensive this time, but anything can happen.
It's definitely wise not to make too many assumptions.
Then next up we have camouflages mounted on carriers will now also be painted on the squadrons, which it looks pretty nice. Doesn't change my opinion about aircraft carriers, but I have to admit it looks very nice here.
Yeah, it's a nice little visual touch.
And I mean, it makes sense because as a carrier player, you're mostly looking at your planes and not as your carrier, right? And you don't just mount camo because you want the bonuses, but also because it looks cool. Then they added dynamic weather-based snow effects on ships. So, if now your guns miss, maybe your gun not just slipped on the snow on your deck. At least you have a convenient explanation.
It definitely doesn't look anywhere near as iced up as the camos for Scharnhorst and Edinburgh, but it's a nice touch again.
Yeah. Speaking of nice touches, they added now textures for Tears of the Desert, Trap, Warrior's Path, and Solomon Islands. So, some maps are looking even better now, which is great. And we only have a few of those screenshots there, but they do look beautiful.
They also, and the most important thing is that they've improved underwater visuals as well when you're looking as a sub through binoculars.
Yeah. And, no matter where you get stuck now, if you get stuck underwater, if you get stuck above water next to an island, at least, you have a better scenery where you can enjoy stuck.
You run yourself aground on the seabed, you can enjoy the high fidelity, high poly rocks and whatever.
Next, they have some more permanent camouflage. The first one, that's basically the same that Hayate has, just now for Maya. And it looks beautiful.
Doesn't Hyuga have that lacquer camo as well? I'm sure it does.
I don't know. I mean, Hayate, like the T10 Destroyer has... I know I have it on the Hayate, right? But
yeah.
Not sure if somebody else has it too.
It's a nice one, anyway.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I like it.
Can't really go wrong with black and gold. It's a classy combination.
True.
Also, the next one, Darren, I do really like. The Fuso one, I didn't manage to get the kind of samurai-themed one, but I'm not exactly cut up about it because I thought it was a little bit overdone. But this Nagato Japanese castle, as they're calling it, camo, that actually looks a lot more refined. What's the word I'm looking for? To my eyes, it looks a lot nicer, less gimmicky.
I mean, maybe because the Fuso Tower is just very high and the statue up there. I think it wasn't the ideal fit. I would have just a higher regular castle tower. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Nagato looks nice. I've unlocked the Fuso one, never used it, but got it.
Just the detailing on it, the kind of stone.
Oh yeah,
work on the whole plating, and then you've got the crenellations and the little pagoda style roofs, and yeah, it's that's one I will be if that's one we can grind out somehow, then I will absolutely be going for that.
Yeah, I don't think they've said how one can get those camos, but Nagato is a ship. I mean, it's not really a ship that I usually play, but I'm more inclined to play it than the Fuso personally.
Weirdo. Fuso's the best. What's wrong with you?
It's the best to make memes about, but that's about it. Then the camouflage Wings of Courage, wasn't that one that from a design contest?
Maybe. I like that one less. Maybe I think mainly because of that shade of green. It's not a bad overall design, but it's just something about that shade of green that's a bit off-putting.
I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of green usually, but I think they make it work out. It's not as beautiful as, for example, the Maya camo, but I think it looks nice.
It's definitely not terrible. There are far worse camos in the game.
I feel like they could have extended, this looks like the wings, or they could have extended it a bit on the mid tower. there is the camo for the what was it, the Prince, like the German one, where it has like the eagle also, and the eagle is not just on the side, but also extends to like the smokestack and the tower and so on. So I feel like they could have extended this ring up there.
Maybe.
But I don't know. What do you mean, Tom? That's what armory was for.
Oh, I mean, some of these might be in the armory for community tokens. One never knows. Like the Aviary one might end up there.
Right, there are certain special camos you can get from the armory. I haven't actually checked what's available for community tokens there.
There's stuff like the Normandy. There's a pair for the Leningrad and the is it Minsk? I can't remember.
Wasn't there like one for like a lower tier battleship too for like New York? Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a skull themed one for New York, and there's one or two others I'm forgetting as well. They're relatively expensive, but they're there, and you can at the moment grind or at least get some community tokens from doing the dirigible derby event. So it's nice to be able to get away to get those.
It would generally be nice if they sold more of the special camos, like the Atlanta palm tree camo. Not sure why such cool camos aren't on sale somewhere. I guess so that they can put them in loot boxes and sell loot boxes.
Maybe. And the next one, the Ragnar camo, I quite like that one. That's a nice blue color. I mean, I don't know how they've come to the connection between Ragnar and owls exactly. Is there some kind of mythological thing I'm missing there? But yeah, I have a feeling that one's going to be one of the because Ragnar's a tier 10 ship. I have a feeling one of the special camos that you need the thingy tokens for.
I'm thinking I'm not the best versed in Norse mythology, I suppose. Owls, I could understand ravens, but owls, I don't know. I
mean, I don't know if Ragnar is like just kind of generic Viking name, or if it's specifically referring to Ragnar Lodbrok, and maybe he had some kind of special connection with owls. I don't know.
Who knows? It looks good though. I like it.
Yeah, that's a nicer one. Yeah, I'm just looking in the armory now. So I have a feeling it's one of those. It'll be one of those ones.
So the Arctic camo. The Arctic camo, I think, like there are 2 or 3 ships that have an Arctic camo. I think that was something that they did Christmas early on when they still had this Christmas convoy missions, right? And they had cool Christmas events with free content. I'm not sure if the Arctic camos ever were otherwise, or whether the probably sold them at some point.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, clan tokens, rank tokens. I bet you anything that Ragnar will be either clan tokens or ranked tokens. It does fit the theme with some of those other ones, like the crocodile one for the black, or the wolf one for Flint. Yeah, some of those are quite nice, and it's just I'm never ever going to be able to get any of them because they're all these ranked and clan tokens. It's just like, okay. It's fine. I'll just have to look at them in the armory, and they'll just have to be pretty. And yeah,
I mean, Constellation of Memory. I like blue and purple, so that helps. I'm not too partial about like the that they all put those I don't know, what would you call that white structure that they have all over?
It's like a
temple sort of thing.
Parthenon temple kind of Greek-looking structure, which I don't think there's any actual constellations that look like that. I don't know why they didn't go with actual constellations.
Exactly. Like if they have just put actual constellation on it, would have been vastly improved, I think. But I do like the starry thing with blue and purple.
True. I think they're also missing a trick of not having it be on the actual constellation, but what do I know? Yeah. Also, a Doolittle themed camo for the Hornet, which is appropriate.
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, on the theme of astronomical themed camos, there's a long history and connection between astronomy and sailing and navigation, because for a very long time that was how you navigated. You used the constellations to figure out where you were exactly, or at least have a best guess as to where you were. It wasn't until we got reliable timepieces that people could figure out longitude as well as they could latitude. So, yeah, which is an interesting story in of itself, but nothing really to do with what we're talking about here on the podcast. But it would be a good, appropriate theme for other camos than this one. That like it seems to be. I don't know. They seem to be going half in with mythological stuff as much as astronomical stuff with that particular camo.
I mean, they could have also just like varied. Like, I'm not sure why they always had to pick the exact same motif. But
yeah, that's a bit. That one could have been better.
It's good, but it's not quite there.
Yeah.
Then there are also some flags, I suppose. Not sure about.
Yeah, it's some of them. It's kind of hard to guess what they are. Like obviously the one with the temple symbol ties in with the camo, and I'm guessing the Italian one ties in with the thing. But there's also one that says Armada del Ecuador. Do we have some Ecuadorian South American Navy ship event coming up? Maybe.
Who knows?
And the other one is for Peru, actually. So yeah, there must be some South American ship event coming up.
I mean, maybe with the Atlantic, huh?
Perhaps. Although that was Brazilian, so why they would have an Ecuadorian and a Peruvian?
Yeah, but like if they just tried to celebrate the entire area,
I guess.
Like South America.
I mean, South America, it's all the same. It's like Africa. Yeah. It's just one big country. It's all the same.
Who knows? I mean, I also don't know where the masks come from. I do like how it looks like, but
that's the only one that's really a mystery, because the cross swords and that's going to be Kings of the Sea.
Yeah,
you can actually see the patch down there for the Kings of the Sea. But yeah, so what is the comedy and tragedy masks going to?
Carnival or something?
I don't think so. That tends to be more kind of related to the theatre? I don't know. Greek drama? Does that tie in with the Parthenon-looking symbol, maybe?
I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody just wanted to draw masks and they were like, yeah, sure, let's go with it. April Fools, that's Talia's masks, okay. So you think that's going to be an April Fool's? Well, we'll see. I hope they have a cool April Fool's event, because I haven't seen any announcement of anything yet.
I just want the bathtub mode back, even if it's for one day. Just give us the bathtub mode back, please, Wargaming, please.
I mean, I wasn't surprised if they bring key battles for the 4th time in a row.
Yeah, probably. So that's it for dev blogs. I don't think we have really much from the portal.
No.
There's some kind of recruiting station event going on, so they're pushing people, trying to recruit more people for some
Yes.
potential premium ship container rewards. So yeah, that's kind of not shocking news to anybody, I suppose. Wargaming trying to bring in new players. We also have the latest of the tier 10 ships on sale for truly eye-watering prices. Moskva and Gross first, which literally just vanished from the game in terms of being tech tree ships. And hey, if you really want to, you can now pay 50,000 doubloons for the most expensive package of each, which is for those in the UK. I don't know how many euros this would be, but it's £138.60 for a single tier 10.
Yes.
Tech ship.
And until recently was free.
Yes, and for that you're getting a 12-point commander, 9 million credits, some camouflages, and some signals.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, the cheaper package, which is a mere 35,000 doubloons, and I don't even know what that would work out to, but that's like 80 or 90 pounds. You only get a 3-point captain with the ship. So generous, Wargaming. So generous.
Also, yeah, somebody mentioned in chat, that's right, the Water World is coming back, like the Water World type battle. I guess that's the April Fool's thing. It's not really much of a Fool's Day mode, I guess, but at least it was a fun mode.
Really. If it's the Destroyer Brawl thing, then that was sure. But I just want the bathtub battles back. It's been so long.
Everybody wants it, so that's why they want to do it.
Yeah. We do have two other kind of, well, you can't escape it at the moment, Ukraine-related pieces of news before we wrap up. Obviously, as everyone is aware, Russia went, we're not going to declare war. What are you talking about? Oh, look, our troops fell over the border into Ukraine. Whoopsie! I guess it's a special operation now. Wargaming has got studios. It's got a studio in Ukraine, obviously St. Petersburg, where the Warships team is based, and then there's Minsk in Belarus, which is also involved. So they're kind of like spread across all sides of this, and it's going to be kind of an awkward time for them. But I suppose you could say the two bits of news are quite good news. So the first one is the long-time employee and was even one of the founder members of Wargaming. I can't remember if he's been around that long, but Sergei, I can never remember if it's Bergatovsky or Bukatovsky, something like that, but popularly known as Serb, who was one of the managers. I can't remember his exact position, but he was high up in the World of Tanks team, and he was responsible for some quite important stuff there, and was known very famously for being quite the troll when he interacted with people on the RU forums. But basically came out publicly in support of the Russian unprovoked war of aggression. And even though I don't think he directly does anything at World of Tanks anymore, or World Warships, he's still an employee of Wargaming, and they basically fired his ass. Or at least it's not quite clear if they fired him or if they were they were kind of like, well, that's unacceptable, you've got to resign. He might have been forced to resign rather than outright fired, but
they got rid of him.
Yeah, he's out of the picture now. So Wargaming didn't want none of that, regardless of how it might play in Russia. And the other thing is that they've given £1 million donation to the Ukrainian Red Cross, or not $1 million, it was $1 million donation to the Ukrainian Red Cross, and have promised to basically help out any Wargaming Ukraine employees that need help. So, I mean, I think we can. It doesn't take hard to. It doesn't take much to read between the lines and guess which side of things that they, as a a corporate entity are on the side of. Which is sort of a no-brainer because, war's bad for business, and they're all kind of caught up in it in various ways. So, yeah. But it's kind of, I mean, I don't necessarily want to give them a pat on the back, but it's more than I might have expected them to do.
Yeah, it was nice to see that donation.
Yeah, I kind of would have maybe more cynically expected them to just keep stum, not say anything, not donate to anybody, maybe give Sturb a rap on the knuckles publicly, but they just immediately went to firing him. So, yeah. So yeah, it's an awkward thing all round, really. I mean, that's one way to describe a war, right? So awkward. Might be a slight understatement, but it's awkward for wargaming, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, they have World of Warships in St. Petersburg. They have World of Tanks, I think, in Belarus. They have World of Warplanes in the Ukraine, and they have their headquarters in Cyprus.
So, I mean, they're not going to be. They might be slightly less worried about repercussions, given that they are headquartered in Cyprus. But Russia is one of their main areas of operation in the Russian language-speaking world. So it's interesting to see that they've at least done this much. They've at least come this much publicly out on the side of Ukraine and against this completely insane war that's going on at the moment. So, yay! Small well done for wargaming.
Yes.
I mean, they haven't gone as far as some other companies. I mean, you've had big names like CDPR come out and other companies and say, we're just, for the duration, we're not doing business in Russia. We're halting sales.
Yeah, but, Wargaming has one studio there, so they can't outright do that realistically.
I mean, yeah, it would be, I don't know how that would work exactly. They would shut down the Russian servers, but everyone...
No, I mean, their whole, team that's working on World of Warships, they'd have to relocate the entire operation.
It would be, it would be awkward, but yeah, I think that's about the strongest statement they could make, and I don't see that happening, just given how much they straddle the borders of all the directly affected nations. But aside from that, on that happy note, I don't think we have really any other news to talk about.
No, I think that's about it. I mean, we've talked about submarines and carriers in an episode, so yay!
We managed to keep the ranting, well, not to a minimum, but to a reasonable level.
We really should have brought on Shingles so I can rant with him for 1 hour about carriers.
Well, I'm sure we can get him in sometime in the next couple of podcasts. I think I actually have some hot off the presses news. I don't know if he shared this elsewhere at the moment, but I'm sure he will do. He basically has got a date for moving in for his house now.
Nice.
The deal is finally done, and he knows exactly when he's going to be able to move in. Sometime later in March. So yeah, I'm sure he'll give more details on Mingles with Jingles at some point. But he was pretty pleased about that, as you can imagine. So yeah, hopefully we can get him in once he's settled in a little bit and gotten his man cave sorted out and all the important things. So should we? Yeah. I know she's not here. We might have her here next week, but should we give Lady Torpida a shout out anyway?
Definitely. Unfortunately, real life intervened, but maybe we'll get her on next week.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. It's very pesky, that real life stuff. Why can't we just all play games? It's not fair.
Exactly. And on that note, I guess we can call it a night. So thanks everyone for watching, and we will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.